not going to get too deep into the details or the methodology. The consultants, so we contracted in the spring of last year with RKG Associates out of Alexandria. These are economic planning and real estate consultants who we contracted to conduct a countywide study of economic and demographic trends and how we can expect those to influence demand and supply for different types of land uses in the county, and what kind of imbalances we may expect based on past patterns. Again, my presentation is going to be very big picture and a generalized overview of this very, very technical document. We're hoping to get the report released by them, hopefully next week from the consultant, so we'll be able to share that with you all at that point. So quickly, the report begins with some demographic and housing data that will set the stage for their report. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to go too deep into the demographic and housing trends. We have Margaret Kai-Ziegler and her staff who are going to present a lot of that data in the context of a housing analysis that they are doing. So I will let them go over most of that data. So I'll be skipping several of the slides that are in last minute's handout, the last meeting's handout that are related to that. But following the report's conclusions on demographic and housing trends, the report goes into past development trends and identifies several key areas of redevelopment potential in the county. There's a real estate market analysis that looks at 5-year trends in broad real estate segments. They look at land use and major land use categories and the future ability to accommodate the demand for each type of land use. They look at details on land demand projections, and then they develop some policy considerations. So that's a broad overview of the report and what I will go in today. So very briefly, I've cut down all the demographic slides in the handout to this one slide. Just broadly, demographic trends, the brief takeaways. They looked at trends from 1970 to 2010, and a lot of what we might expect, that the county is one of the most affluent and economically prosperous region of the U.S. The county population does continue to grow, but at a slower rate than previously, at least through 2010. There's been strong employment growth in the last 40 years, particularly in North County around BWI and Fort Meade, and it's become an attractive location for retirees, and there's been strong growth in the Hispanic population in the county. In terms of housing trends, some key takeaways related to housing: that single family tends to be the predominant housing type in the county. Single family development is slowing compared to other housing types. Half of the housing stock in the county was built before 1980, and their projections for new housing construction from 2018 to 2035, they're projecting about 28,000 new units in the county, and of those, about 86% will be owner-occupied. These are their projections. So again, Margaret and her staff are going to delve a little bit more deeply into that following this presentation. So looking at development trends, they track development trends for both residential and non-residential uses in the county, and they did that using State Department of Assessment and Taxation data by the year that structures were built. And so in terms of residential units, they looked at single-family, townhouse, condominium, apartment, and mobile homes. And then in terms of non-residential uses, they generalized the categories in terms of retail, office, industrial services, restaurant, hospitality, and then other. And they looked at that in terms of building square feet. So they looked at trends both countywide, and then they looked also by submarkets. And they divided the county into 10 different submarkets. Now this report was started well before we had our 9 draft region areas, and so the best that we had to go off was looking at the original small area plan boundaries, and in developing the 10 submarkets that this report looks at, they basically combined several of our small areas. So basically Jessup and Maryland City, was intact but pulled in Fort Meade and the Patuxent Wildlife Refuge for one submarket. The small areas of Linthicum and Severn were combined in a submarket. Brooklyn Park, Glen Burnie, Pasadena combined in one submarket. Annapolis Neck, Broadneck combined, Severna Park and Crownsville, and then Deal and Edgewater were combined as common water communities. So these were kind of the 10 submarkets that they used to kind of delve down below just the countywide level in terms of some of these trends. So what they saw in terms of residential development trends, over 48,000 acres were developed in the last 36 years for residential uses. And that represents a 143% increase in the residential building square footage, or about 3.9% annual growth. It was a 99% increase in the number of residential parcels. The peak residential development occurred in the 1990s when over 25,000 parcels were developed, compared to the period between 2010 and 2017, there were only 8,500 parcels developed. So this map represents the residential development trends throughout the county. And in this map, the green represents the parks and open space throughout the county. But basically it reflects several things. One, that there were preservation policies in place in the southern portion of the county, and typically higher density development occurred more in the northern parts of the county. Currently about 60% of the residential development is at what they considered medium density, which is lot sizes between about 4,800 square feet, 15,000 square feet. The largest share of acreage of new development went into the rural, agricultural, and the low density areas. So that took up about 72% of the acreage, and that may be fairly intuitive because larger lots, lower density development. Higher density development grew as a percentage of new residential development, and it peaked in the 1990s and remains a larger share of the building square footage. But it is the smallest share of the residential land acreage consumed, so about under 2% of the residential acreage consumed. And that's typically concentrated in the northern half of the county. In terms of non-residential development trends, so these were, again, the retail, office, industrial, service, restaurant, hospitality, and other. They did not include any of these institutional, like churches or schools, government, or any vacant or conservation land. But countywide, the non-residential development accounted for 15.1% of the land acres and 28.5% of the building square footage and 25% of the assessed value. That's countywide. Of the non-residential, industrial is the largest land use by acreage, and office is the largest by assessed value, again, countywide. And 57% of the non-residential building square footage is clustered more in the northern submarkets, so that's the Linthicum, Severn, and Brooklyn Park, Glen Burnie, Pasadena areas. So this map shows where the non-residential development has taken place in the county since 1980, and that's typically been, you'll see concentrations along your transportation corridors. There's a lot around I and in the parole area here where we are now. About 69 million square feet of non-residential space was added since 1980, and over a third of this was residential. Was industrial. So looking at the development trends by these submarkets, the Jessup, Maryland City submarket had significant townhome development that was attributed to the proximity to Fort Meade and NSA and other employment areas up there. And there was substantial non-residential development, particularly office development, as a spinoff from the National Business Park and NSA. In the Linthicum-Severn submarket, residential development was focused almost exclusively on single-family homes in the 1980s, and about 92%, and these were typically medium-density residential. By 2010, the townhome development had overtaken the single-family residential, and since 2000, the residential development has slowed. Again, this is all in Linthicum-Severn. About 46% of the total non-residential building square footage in Linthicum-Severn is industrial, and this is the highest percentage of all of the submarkets. It has become a commercial destination with about 4.6 million square feet of new retail and restaurant hospitality space since 2000, so think the Arundel Mills area. In Brooklyn Park, Glenburnie, and Pasadena, in terms of residential development since 1980, there's been about 14,600 properties. Of those, about 59% were single-family, 40% were townhome. These tended to have the lowest assessed value of all the submarkets. The primary type of residential development was single-family through the 1990s, but then more apartments were added into the mix after the year 2000. Townhomes now outpace single-family residential development in this area. There was substantial non-residential development in that submarket, 70% of which is now industrial office, and it was largely built in the 1980s and 1990s. A lot of retail growth along major corridors. The Lakeshore area, primarily residential and primarily single-family homes, most of those constructed in the 1980s. Not a lot of non-residential, most of that is limited to the Lakeshore Shopping Plaza, which predates the year 2000. In the Odenton area, the residential inventory, about half of that inventory is large lot single family and about half townhome. Much of the residential development occurred between 1990 and 2009. There's more multi-family development recently, with nearly half of apartment construction having happened since 2010. And they are experiencing growth pressure along Crane Highway, around Chapel and the industrial uses in that area. The Severna Park and Crownsville submarket, residential and non-residential building space doubled since 1980, primarily in Severna Park around the Benfield and I-97 area, and also around the Park Plaza Shopping Center. This submarket had the slowest rate, in this submarket, the slowest rate of development was in more recent years, between 2010 and 2017, where all but about 8.9% of the residential and all but about 14.4% of the non-residential was before 2010. And in terms of parcels, about 99% of residential development has been single family in that area. In Annapolis Neck and Broadneck, the residential inventory is currently at 147% of what it was in 1980 in terms of building square footage. This is primarily single family with 20% townhomes, and a lot of this development happened prior to 2010. 9.6 million square feet of non-residential space was built since 1980, which is an increase of over 300%, and a lot of that has been focused here in Florida. In Crofton, a lot of the development since 1980 has been residential. About 77% of the properties were developed between 1980 and 1999. 3% of residential properties were developed since 2010. 31% of development there or 31% of the residential is townhomes, and non-residential development there has experienced growth, particularly in the Chapel area and the 450 or Route 3 area. However, only about 9% of the growth in terms of building square footage has occurred since 2010. In South County, not a whole lot of development, just over 3,000 new residential parcels, and the average lot size of those is around 5 acres, they're saying, so it consumes about 17,000 acres in total. In terms of non-residential development, not very much. only 189,000 building square feet, and that's been since 1980. And then in Edgewater and Deal Shady side, that submarket has had a little more steady residential and non-residential growth since 1980. The residential annual average has been about 188 new parcels per year, dropping to 55 parcels per year since 2010. And in terms of non-residential, about 37,000 square feet annually on average since 1980. About 20% of the new residential development there since 1990 has been townhouse development. And of course, a lot of the non-residential has been focused in the Edgewater area. So the consultants looked at non-residential properties to assess redevelopment potential throughout the county and identify areas of potential focus for redevelopment. And they did this by looking at the building assessed value by building type, so again, retail, office, industrial, et cetera, on a per square foot basis, and then comparing that to the median value of other properties in the county. And doing that, they assume a correlation between the assessed value and building condition. And then they looked at that data and then confirmed it with field observation. And what they've done is they've developed a series of heat maps that show areas that fall above and below the median building value and what areas therefore have potential for redevelopment throughout the county. So here's a county-wide map where you can see the heat maps that they developed. The red areas are areas that are at less than 25% of the median assessed value of other similar building types throughout the county. So county-wide, in terms of redevelopment potential, only about 1.6% of residential properties have an assessed value ratio of less than 50% of the median value per square foot. However, 22% of apartments fall in the range of 25% to 50% of the median assessed value range. So that indicates about 22% of apartments may be in a moderate to poor condition, and there may be areas of focus there. In terms of non-residential properties in fair to poor condition, again, valued at less than 50% of the median assessed value, these are often areas with higher vacancy and lower operating revenues and sales prices, and these are often along older retail corridors. So 20% of all retail property types are in that fair to poor condition. 24.6% of service uses are in fair to poor condition, and 23.2% of restaurant or hospitality land uses are in that fair to poor condition. So they identified several areas in some of the submarkets. I think just 4 of the submarkets. 3 of those areas were in the Linthicum and Severn area. The first is the Stony Run area to the north or to the west of BWI area. This is an area that is currently industrial and office as well as service and distribution. There are a lot of properties there that are below 50% of the assessed value ratio, and a lot of vacant parcels as well. So redevelopment potential in that area. Also between the Maryland 176 and Maryland 100 corridors just south of BWI, this area has a lot of vacant parcels that are surrounded by residential neighborhoods and manufacturing and distribution centers. But there is an opportunity because the area is well serviced by transportation corridors and employment centers. And then the Maryland 170 corridor at the south end of that site, that's just north of the Odenton Town Center on Telegraph Road. This has older residential and non-residential properties along the corridor, and a lot of this surrounded by residential, and the consultants seem to think that the high concentration of the surrounding residential development may contribute to a deteriorating condition among the non-residential in that area. So maybe something to look at. And when you're looking at these heat maps, the darker colors indicate areas of more redevelopment potential and need. In the Brooklyn Park, Glen Burnie, and Pasadena area, four key areas of redevelopment potential. The first, just south of 695, and they include the Army Depot area, the federal property there. They identify it as underutilized, but maybe a future opportunity depending on what happens with that site. The Glen Burnie Town Center, a lot of small local businesses, and it's surrounded by the residential neighborhoods there, but there are a lot of lower value properties and vacancies in that area. A lot of these areas in the Glen Burnie Town Center are currently targeted by commercial revitalization areas, so there are efforts already in place for some of those areas. Crane Highway and the Maryland 10 corridor, so that's on the bottom left of the map there. More of this area is residential, but there are several key underutilized non-residential properties, including East Park Plaza and the Target, both of which are 50%, below 50% of the median assessed value. And finally, the Marley Station area, some of Marley Mall is vacant, and several of the surrounding non-residential properties seem to be underperforming along the corridor. In Odenton, basically they cited the whole Odenton Town Center as one redevelopment, potential redevelopment area. Still has a number of underperforming or vacant properties within the bounds of the town center. Also along Wall-Chapel and Crane Highway, the area that's kind of anchored by the Wall-Chapel Town Center has a number of surrounding vacant, underperforming non-residential properties. And then finally, in the Crofton area, they identified one area along much of the Crane Highway corridor as a redevelopment, as a potential redevelopment location. Because of its prime location, some of the properties seem to be underutilized, and there may be an opportunity, they noted, for commercial redevelopment and revitalizing a village or community center that serves the surrounding residential neighborhoods in that area. Moving on, their report goes on to look at, to conduct a real estate market analysis. And what they did here was they looked at 5-year trends using data from CoStar market reports. These have slightly different sub-market boundaries than they had in the previous sections. But, and the data included data from the city of Annapolis that they weren't able to tease out. But they did look at some 5-year trends based on that. They focused this study on multifamily, retail, office, and industrial uses, and then they concluded by gathering some qualitative data by conducting interviews with local real estate professionals to get their take on the local real estate market. So what they found generally in terms of multifamily, about 30,000 multifamily units countywide. Most of these are in buildings with 10 or more units. The majority of multifamily is in the northern part of the county, and the majority of that is 1 or 2 bedroom units. About 87% of the total is 1 or 2 bedroom units. There are nearly 1,000 age-restricted units countywide, and these again are mostly in northern county, the northern part of the county, and in Annapolis. They did say that there were approximately 970 new multifamily units added annually for the last 5 years, mainly along in this case, mainly along Odenton and Crofton Crane Highway corridor, and in Annapolis, and in the area west of BWI. Rental rates for these multifamily units, there was a wide range with the highest average rent in Annapolis and in the BWI area. In South County, there are only 608 multifamily units. Lower rent points there between $430 and $766, and so they are wondering about condition issues with units there. Countywide, though, they know that there is high demand. There's a 6.5% vacancy, which is fairly low. However, the highest vacancy is in the BWI area and the area to the north of BWI. But interestingly, they have the lowest number of multifamily units in that submarket as well. In terms of the retail inventory, about 30 million square feet of retail in the county. Route 2 North and Annapolis have the biggest retail supply, each over 8 million square feet, and together they're, both over 8 million square feet, and together that's about 40% of the total retail square footage. Countywide, there's been approximately 130,000 square feet of retail added annually for the last 5 years. They know that Anne Arundel County is a retail destination in itself, especially for communities on the Eastern Shore. Vacancy is low at 4.3%, where 4.5% is the national average. And the retail absorption rate has been strong, particularly along Crane Highway in Crofton-Odenton area, and then along Route 2 North in the last 5 years. Office inventory, there's 22 million square feet of office space existing in the county. Much of the new development of office space has been focused around BWI. Rental rates average about $23.70 in the county. That's a little bit high per square foot. That's a little bit higher than the region, and the highest rental rates are in the BWI and west of BWI area. However, there are areas of high vacancy in the office inventory in the county, and that's particularly around the north of BWI area. So they do note that demand for office may be slowing countywide. And then in terms of industrial and flex inventory, the consultants note that the inventory is strong. Industrial is 38% of all of the building square footage that was delivered in the county since 1980, so all of the construction since 1980. We have about 35 million square feet of total industrial in the county. There's very limited industrial available in the southern part of the county. There are several large-scale industrial and business parks, particularly in the BWI area and the area west of BWI, and in the area Route 2 North. Together, those areas account for about 22 million square feet of the industrial square footage. The rent average is about $9.28 per square foot for industrial space. The rents are highest in Annapolis, though, where it's over $14 a square foot, so $5 per square foot higher in the Annapolis area. Some of the business parks are functioning as mixed-use areas, and this is a trend that they note is happening more nationally as well. Vacancy for industrial in the county, industrial uses, it's above both the regional and the national average by a good bit. In the county, it's 7.3%, whereas in the metro area, it's about 6.7%. And so their conclusion is that this suggests that industrial and warehousing may be underperforming. There may be condition issues with some of our industrial areas. In the BWI and submarket and the area to the west of BWI, they have the highest vacancy rate at over 14% vacancy, and they have half of the vacant space for industrial in the county. So again, they cite potential condition issues there, but that same area also has the highest absorption rate by square footage. So an interesting contrast there. And they do note that there's potential for increased competition for industrial space from Baltimore County, particularly with Sparrows Point. So that may impact the industrial real estate market in the future. They did a series of interviews with real estate professionals, several of them in the county, and so the developers offered a range of thoughts that are worth a read. But just some of the key highlights, they felt like the town centers are pretty critical to growth in the county. They see a strong market for commercial and warehouse distribution uses, and they see several growth opportunities in the county: medical and medical office, growth associated with Fort Meade and the spin-off businesses and offices around there. Industrial, warehouse, and distribution demand is growing, particularly around BWI with the direct-to-consumer economy. And they felt like the office market was generally not doing so well countywide. They did ask about the potential for mixed use, suggesting that you really need a large amount of proximate residential uses to generate the demand for retail and the higher rents. And you need higher rents to be able to support the infrastructure to do mixed-use projects. And then they had several comments about the development entitlement process, which is the right to develop in the county. So they have a lot of comments about it being challenging to develop in the county, some sensitivity to greenfield development, and they did have questions about how do we ensure that the process results in higher quality development in the county. So some good thoughts in that regard. So from there, the report moved into a land use and land capacity analysis. They looked at what is the land use mix and the land capacity for the major land use categories in each of the submarkets. So in terms of land capacity, they looked at the number of developable land acres based on current zoning that are currently undeveloped and without natural constraints. And then they compared this to future land demand, which I'll discuss next. And in general, their findings were that properties classified as developed land uses were about 91% of the county's land area. Now, that's not to say that 91% of the county is developed, but just the parcels that are classified are comprise 91% of the county's land area. Residential uses are about 1/3 of that developed acreage, and a lot of that is because of large lot and low density residential, particularly in South County, Annapolis Neck, Broadneck, and then parts of Savannah Park and Crownsville. Some of the major commercial, office, and industrial areas are in the north part of the county: Jessup, Maryland City, Linthicum-Severn, and Brooklyn Park, and Glen Burnie, near transportation nodes. They did note that there is more undeveloped land, more land classified as undeveloped than there is land that is classified as commercial, office, and industrial together in the county. So over a quarter of undeveloped parcels are currently in South County. However, there are substantial areas that are undeveloped in North and West County as well. And then agriculture and park, recreational, or open space land uses account for about 36% of the county's total land area. In terms of land capacity, as of 2018, what they did was they took the remaining developable land from the previous analysis, removed parcels that were proposed or platted as a part of a subdivision and that had environmental constraints, and with that they estimated a supply of 13,736 acres of developable land remaining as of 2018. And of that, 24% is in South County, which is typically large lot residential or agriculture, so growth potential there is limited by current zoning and policies. 47% of that total is residential, 21% of the overall total is, 21% of that residential is in the Brooklyn Park, Glen Burnie, or Pasadena submarket, where there's more capacity for high density residential development. 12.2% of the 13,000 acres, 12.2% is industrial. Most of that is in the Jessup, Maryland City area, Linthicum-Severn, and Brooklyn Park, Glen Burnie, Pasadena. And there's a lot less land, available land for commercial or mixed use, and these tend to be also in Jessup, Maryland City, Linthicum, Severn, Brooklyn Park, Glen Burnie. There is limited growth potential in the rural submarkets due to the zoning, and they anticipate a lot of the growth in population and employment is going to happen again in Jessup, Maryland City, Linthicum, Severn, and Brooklyn Park, Glen Burnie, Pasadena. So land demand projections were developed based on their future population projections and household and employment growth projections for the county out to 2035. The projections were then converted into demand for new residential and non-residential building space and the required land acres for that, and then it was compared against land capacity in the different submarkets. So first, some of their demographic and employment projections. They anticipate that by 2035, the county is going to grow by 94,000 persons, an annual growth rate of about 1% to 637,000. They anticipate the highest growth rates in Odenton at about 2.2%, and Linthicum Severn at 1.9%. They project that the number of households will increase by 28,000 by 2035, and most of that will be in the Linthicum Severn submarket, Brooklyn Park, Glen Burnie, Pasadena, Odenton, and Annapolis Neck, Broad Neck. They suspect that the largest population change will be in Linthicum Severn, Brooklyn Park, Glen Burnie, Pasadena, Odenton, Annapolis Neck, and Broad Neck. About 77% of the total population growth in the county and 75% of the household growth will be in those areas. They project the smallest population change in Lakeshore, Crofton, and South County. And in terms of employment, they see county-wide growth of 46,700 jobs. And again, these would be more likely in Jessup, Maryland City, Linthicum Severn, Brooklyn Park, Glen Burnie, and then Annapolis Neck and Broad Neck, particularly in the rural area. And in particular, they see job growth in industrial-related jobs, and particularly in Linthicum Severn and Brooklyn Park and Glen Burnie. So inputting those population and employment projections into the land demand, a reminder, they found 13,700 acres that are developable. Their findings, they in terms of residential, they said the county has about 6,500 acres of developable residential land, but we're projected to consume by 2035 9,200 acres, so 142% demand over supply, and a lot of that excess demand will be due to demand for single-family housing. There is availability for residential land in Jessup, Maryland City, Brooklyn Park, Glen Burnie, Lakeshore, and Edgewater, Deal Shadyside, but the other submarkets will run out of available residential land by 2035. They also note that South County consumes a lot of land for development due to the low density policies and large lot development that occurs there. In terms of non-residential development, by 2035, 116% of the developable commercial land could be consumed, with 8 of the 10 submarkets having more demand than supply of land. So everywhere in the county except Jessup, Maryland City, and Odenton would have more demand than supply. And by 2035, 93% of all developable industrial land could be consumed, with more demand than supply for industrial in Edgewater, Deal, Shadyside, Crofton, Savannah Park, and Crownsville, and Odenton. And there would be remaining supply for industrial in 2035 in Jessup, Maryland City, Linthicum Severn, and Brooklyn Park, Glen Burnie, and Pasadena. So back up quickly. So some of the implications that they noted from this were that they see growth in the northern and central submarkets through 2035, driven primarily by employment growth and housing demand They see continued growth in the town centers, but limited land supply to grow in those areas. They see the potential to expand in Odenton for commercial, but less potential in Odenton for residential and industrial growth. And they see a lot of that growth, of course, influenced by the growth at Fort Meade. The submarkets that they see as best positioned for growth are Jessup, Maryland City, Linthicum, Severn, and Brooklyn Park, Glen Burnie, Pasadena, all due to the availability of developable land. But in summary, strained land availability over the next 17 years, exacerbated by low-density suburban growth, density policies, and they suggest considering greater densities and redevelopment in targeted locations that allow for expansion. So, in some of their policy considerations, in terms of housing, they suggest expanding resources for housing rehabilitation in low-income neighborhoods that have declining housing values. So targeted programs toward both rental and home ownership. They suggest diversifying the housing stock with more high-density rental development in areas near transportation corridors with access to employment and amenities, and they suggest promoting rental housing in the county's opportunity zones. Those are primarily in Brooklyn Park, and there's one opportunity zone in Odenton. They recommend targeting redevelopment in those areas that were previously identified in Linthicum, Severn, Brooklyn Park, Glen Burnie, Odenton, and Crofton. And then they had a number of policy things to consider regarding land use and development review at the county level, ways to improve the development review and approval process, including expedited review processes for smaller development proposals. They recommended considering several county code updates, including maybe a unified development code, linking recent code amendments, updated definitions, considering aspects of form-based codes for some areas, and then refining the mixed-use development options and improving flexibility. They also recommended staffing resources and reviewing impact fees to ensure that those are adequate and proportional to the development. So that's the report. I won't say in a nutshell, because that was not exactly a nutshell. That's a giant bite and very, very dense. I appreciate you all bearing with me through all of that. Again, we're hoping to have the approved final report from the consultant by the end of next week, and that'll, I think, help you all if you want to take a look at that. It'll help inform some of the land use decisions that we'll be making, but hopefully by the next meeting we'll be able to share that with you all.
Patrick, will that be able to be electronically put on the Google Drive? Are we 300 pages, 30 pages? Any idea how big it is? About. So it's readable. Is it right there? Okay. Good.
Yes.
Okay. It's not a.
There. Yeah.
It's not
Just
a
a little light reading.
little light reading while you're traveling. Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry. What did?
Well, because I just wanted to understand whether the data in here is about projects that were completely built at the time, in this time frame, or was it built and approved within that time?
So they use data from the State Department to establish the trends. They looked at what was built between 1980 and 2010, and then they had kind of a complex methodology to do their projections out. It took into consideration our zoning and some of our policies and such, but yes.
Just one other quick question. This is long ago, basically. You know, there's been 9 years since.
Well, they did break out. You'll see in the report they broke out some of those trends by decade, and they did look. So there is new by decades through some of those trends, and then they did look more recently at some of the 5-year trends as well to look at some of their projections.
And that's all built, stuff that's actually
Well, yeah, when they were establishing the past frames, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Patrick, we appreciate that. Next is Margaret. She's gonna go ahead and get started with her team, and then, of course, we'll break if the county executive arrives. When the county executive arrives.
Good evening. I'm Margaret Ziegler. I work with the Research GIS section in the office. And tonight we have a presentation for you on...
Oh, hold on. Hello, sir.
There we go.
Good timing.
Just wondering where I was.
No, perfect.
just
No, we're just in between, so absolutely perfect. So,
Good.
our county executive, thank you.
All right. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
So I won't keep you too long because I know you've got a whole lot of work. That's part of why I'm here, because you guys got a whole lot of work. But I want to thank you for everything you've been doing. I know it's not easy, but I just want to throw something in there that I'm kind of excited about. It's a decision that you all made, and we're going to be doing an announcement about this to the public, even though it's kind of already out there, on December 3rd, which is the one-year anniversary of the inauguration, because I think this is the most important work that we're doing in the county, which is the timeline for the GDP rollout, the regional plans, and then comp rezoning. And I know that you guys have talked about this, and the reason that I'm so excited about it is that last time we did the GDP, 2009, there was a GDP, and then that got approved by the county council, and then they went into this comp rezoning, and they did sections of the county because they couldn't handle it all at once. But most people's experience of that, who were watching, thought it didn't work very well because, well, small area plans have been done a long time before that, so there was really no public input in the process. And then the county council got to it. In fact, it was a new county council by the time they did the comp rezoning. They hadn't done the GDP, that was the previous county council, so they pretty much ignored it all. And they did the comp rezoning based on applications that came in, and they just sort of read the politics of the situation, and county executive ended up vetoing a bunch of them, and it was, to me, a big mess. It didn't really reflect any plan when they did the rezoning. So what you all have decided to do, I think you made this decision, I hope they made this decision, that's what I've been told, that not going to do the comp rezoning right off of the GDP. Do the GDP, and it's going to be this general plan for the county, and then there are going to be these regional plans. And each one of these 9 regions will have a citizens group that is going to be making a real plan, like the old small area plans, and then the rezoning will happen with that. And that's a best practice that I think is becoming more and more understood to be a best practice. Frederick has done it. The Alliance for Livable Communities of the county has recommended that we do it this way. And so we're going to announce that we're going to do it this way. And I want to mention that because I know that it's really easy in this process with the GDP to get down into the weeds about all the details of things that really will end up being in those regional plans, the detail. And it's probably frustrating. In fact, I've been told that it's frustrating, this process now, because now you have a timeline that we've changed twice, and now we can't change it anymore. So we have to actually get this damn GDP done on the timeline that we've set. And you've got a committee of a whole bunch of people, and then you've got the people who are going to write the plan. And if you imagine what it would be like to write a book with a committee of 20 people, and then you have the authors, it's going to be uncomfortable. And I understand that it's uncomfortable. So that's kind of why I'm thanking you for doing this. But I'm also kind of urging you to let the staff do what they need to do to get the writing piece done, and make sure that you're there for the really important decisions, and kind of let them guide you on that, because it's going to be a real challenge to get this done in time, and we want to make sure that your voices are heard, or else what's the point, right? But not heard on every detail that might be stuff that's in the regional plan. So that's my message. I mean, that's hopefully what you're doing already, and that you understand that. But we really are under the gun right now, and we're gonna go to the public and the press on December 3rd, and we're gonna say, this is our timeline, this is how we're gonna do it. And this is the part where the citizens really get to have a voice, is that, those regional plans. And the GDP is up to you guys and the staff, and you got a lot of work to do. And I feel really good about the staffing right now. You know, I think I said when I came in here before that I was kind of nervous about this whole process, because I was elected to make sure that we didn't do what we did last time. You know, that we did something where the zoning and the land use of the county really was what people wanted, and not what, you know, somebody was gonna make a profit off here or there and just sort of mishmash. And I think, I feel like we've got the staffing in place to do that. I know that there are people that are really uncomfortable about some of it. Some of it's controversial. Forest conservation was controversial, but at the end of the day, we got seven votes out of 7, which I thought was huge to get a bipartisan decision on that. And it was a compromise, and it was uncomfortable. And believe me, the council members did not enjoy the process, just like some of you may not enjoy this process. But please, get it done. That's all I got. Anybody got any questions before I go?
Great, thank you.
I got another meeting.
I know,
Believe it or not.
very brief, I know,
Yeah.
believe it or not, so we
Yeah.
appreciate it,
Okay.
thank you very much.
All right, cool.
Appreciate
Thank
your
you.
work. We look fulfilling our duty, on time, and
Sorry.
under budget.
I should say thank you, and I'm sorry for putting that to Yeah, it'd be great. It's gonna be, I think it's gonna be downstairs in room 161.
We'll send it out.
Yeah,
We
yeah, that would
haven't
be great.
finalized all the
It's gonna
details
be in the
on it
daytime.
yet, but
Unfortunately, it's gonna be 11 o'clock, I think, or somewhere around
I
there.
think it is somewhere between 11, 12, or 1,
Okay.
all of it, so, but
All right.
December 3rd, for sure. So, thank you, sir, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, so back to housing. First I want to really quickly introduce the team that's been working on this. Rick Fisher, he's the senior planner in the research team, and Eric Hublin, he's our planner 3, and the person who couldn't make it tonight, Stephanie Martin. She works contractual with us part-time, and actually did a lot of work with the state before. That's the team who's put this together. Eric's going to help me with the presentation. We're going to run through this fairly quickly, so if you kind of keep your questions to the end, it's greatly appreciated. Okay, so first I want to start off with just giving you a little background on some regional trends. So we're looking at Anne Arundel County in comparison to some of the surrounding counties in this chart. Looking at population change between 1970 and 2018, just so you can get a feel. So you'll note that in terms of size, Anne Arundel County has the 3rd largest population of these counties listed. If you look at the numbers in total, the total population change between 1970 and 2018, Anne Arundel has the most growth. Okay, but what does that number really mean? What story does that really tell? Okay, if we look at it in terms of percent change in population, so it would be relative to the size of the counties, okay, Anne Arundel becomes 5th in the region. Okay, so the majority of the growth that has occurred within that time period is in Howard County. Okay. If we look at it in terms of the net change, so the actual numbers of change, okay, then Anne Arundel is 2nd amongst these counties. And then if we look at it as a percent change in, okay, so this is looking at it between 2010 and 2018. Before we were looking long-term, 1970 and up. Now we're looking at just the last 8 years. If we look at just the last 8 years, Anne Arundel County is 2nd in the region, and it's significantly less, as you notice, than what's occurred in Howard County. In terms of household growth, okay, looking at household growth, and this is again 1970 up to 2017, and what we've done is we've tried to take the numbers that were in the study, the RKG study that Patrick was providing you. We've done that, and then we've added the well, 2017, 2018, whatever is the most recent one we get to that data, to try to put it in perspective. In terms of the household growth, Anne Arundel County is second largest in the total numbers compared to the surrounding agencies, but as a percentage of the annual change over the last 4 years, Anne Arundel is fifth. Household size has fallen between 1970 and 2000 for all jurisdictions in the region and the state of Maryland. Between 2000 and 2010, 4 counties increased in size, and 3, including Anne Arundel County, decreased in size. Between 2010 and 2017, 4 counties, including Anne Arundel County, increased, but out of the 4, Anne Arundel County was third. As you also notice here, Anne Arundel County has one of the lowest household sizes in the region. Okay, so I think our average is around 2.6, 2.68, and we've been fairly consistent lately with that. The median household's personal income is second highest in the region. See that here replicated below Howard County. If we look at the incomes, kind of stratified here, it's no surprise in this table, concentration of our income ranges is between the 60 and 124,000 median income per household. Okay. Moving on to the county trends. Okay. When we look at population of the county, I wanted you to see what are some of the characteristics that are taken into consideration when we look at population. Factors to take into consideration is the birth rate, the death rate, we have international migration, and we have domestic migration. And these factors are taken into consideration when we look at the population growth numbers. So looking at our population here, you can see Anne Arundel County is predominantly white. No surprise, but the white percentage is decreasing as the minority population is increasing. Something that Patrick had pointed out before, Hispanic ethnicity, separate from race, right? Because you can be of a race and also be a Hispanic ethnicity, so 2 separate things. The percentage of the population has increased significantly between 2000 and 2017. And the other thing that should be noted is in 2010 the census started asking whether there were 2 or more races. And you'll see, I think, in the next census that's going to increase even more. Slides are in a different order than I thought they were. Okay, so this is looking at the population change again over time, but it's kind of stratified by generation. You can see that the population median age at the bottom there has increased over time. So 1970 it was 25.4. We're now up to the median age is 38.4. Okay, again, this is taking that same information but grouping it by generational cohort. So you can see the majority is still, well, the largest cohort is still the baby boomers. All right. Looking at this chart, you can see that a significant portion of our working population is over 45 years of age. So we're an older population here. But if you look at that in terms of some of the surrounding counties, our median age really maybe isn't that high. Okay. Moving on into some of our building permit information. This is looking at the county's building permit history. It's slowed down since 2015, as you can see. Single-family development has remained fairly constant. Townhouse development has been increasing since 2006. And the multifamily, it kind of goes up and down. It looks like a little crazy, but I think a lot of that has to do with, usually associated with multi-family unit developments, so they come in high concentrations, so it's a big growth and a drop. We have seen a significant increase in multifamily building permits in 2019, just so you know.
What's the difference between SFA and SFD?
Single-family attached is like a townhouse, single-family detached.
Thank you.
And
I just was whispering the same thing over here.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay.
And this is just charting that same information, so you can see it in comparison to each other. And like I said, if you look at the multifamilies, like up and down and down. Okay. Okay, we're gonna move on now to Eric, right?
I think it's video regional planning.
Regional planning, why have a regional planning nurse? Oh, I think my packet is in the wrong order. Okay, let me see what we got here. Regional planning and area profiles. Okay, so we passed out for you your chart here. These are your regions, and we tried to do a little bit of analysis by your regions. Now, this following information, I want you to, the way we've presented it to you, I didn't present it to you this way to compare region to region. That's not the intent. The intent is that you can take each of my charts and you can look at it and you can say, oh, this region has an increase, has a lower number of housing, but it might have a higher incomes in that area. So what I want you to do is I want you to take the information I want you to overlay it to get a better picture of the whole. So that, again, the intent is not to compare one region to the other, okay? I think I wrote this. Okay. Didn't know it was units. All right. So this is household growth. You can see areas 3 and 4 have the majority of the growth in the county. This is just a map of it. I think we tried to lift your things and you have the graph and the map at the same time, just so you get a good picture of it. Okay. Percent increase in total households. And a lot of this is between 2010 and 2019. We use ESRI data for this. I want you to know that up front because census data doesn't go right to 2019, and we couldn't break it into your regions. I call them sub-regions, I know I shouldn't call them that, your regions. But we could get that information from ESRI. And they have a big, long algorithm that they use in order to break it down in that manner. Okay, cover this? I thought you were covering it. That's why, okay. Okay. 24% of the houses in the region are in, okay, you can see that it's in area 2, followed by area 5. And these are the current growth areas you can see here on this map, 2 and 5, current growth areas in the county. This is average household size. It looks fairly consistent. The larger household sizes are in regions 4 and regions 8. You see that in this map as well. Okay.
Margaret, can you define average household size? Are we talking about number of people?
Yes,
Okay.
number of people per household.
Thank you.
Okay, and this is median household income, okay? Highest income for the county is in region 6, which probably isn't too surprising, right? Is that right? Yeah. Okay, and then lastly, we were looking at housing units by type. And this one, we stuck this one in here because we wanted you to see where the vacant housing was, okay? And it's breaking it down by owner-occupied, renter-occupied, and vacant. So the majority of the vacant is in the region 9. And here we go. That could be seasonal housing, and part of it could be that. Okay. So this is in preparation for getting into some of the sales information. Rule of thumb for housing is that a household should spend about 30% of their household income on housing. So So this chart is showing what percentage of the population or households within each of these regions is paying more than 30% of their household income on housing. And here's a map of it that goes along with it. Okay, I'm gonna turn this over to Eric. This doesn't work very often.
Any corollary here between houses that are owned and paid off, as opposed to, do we know if they're,
Eric will get into that,
Okay.
right? You'll,
A little,
You talk a
we
little
don't
bit
talk
about
about the paid off, but we
oh,
talk
that
about,
makes good.
the potential.
Sometimes that data can be split out, yes, for the census information, but not on the region area. When we look at the county as a whole, and Eric's going to give you some information, but it's on the county as a whole.
which is, this surprises me, so I was wondering.
Oh, okay.
That might have been a contributing factor.
So residential sales data, again, we're gonna look at the residential sales data by the 9 planning regions. And the purpose of this is to kind of develop a profile for each region, so that you kind of understand what's happening in each of the zones. So looking at the total residential sales for the county by region, there was a total, this is from September 2018 to August 30th, 2019. And in that time period, there was a total of 9,654 homes sold. And a majority of these sales occurred in regions 4 and 3. That's kind of near the Lynn, Bernie, Pasadena, Severn, Arnold region.
And that's new or?
Yeah, all house,
All house.
total houses sold. So
Could you repeat the total?
9,000, let's see, 9,654. It's in the data with multi-million-dollar houses skewing the data one way or the other. So looking at this, the median, the higher median sales were in regions 8 and 6. And you can see that the lowest median sales value was in region 1. When we look at that here, you see that's Crownsville and Davidsonville, South County. And then you have Brooklyn Park up there in region 1. And then moving on to the average square footage of structures. You can see that this again aligns with the median sales value. Region 8 and 6 have the largest square footage, and region 1 has the smallest square footage. So,
These are just houses, not farms.
yeah, just homes.
That was my question too. Okay, so when you go back to, I'm sorry, they're not numbered, but the median residential sales value,
Yep.
that is per lot or per house?
Yeah, that would be
Per
the house.
property.
Looking at the structure.
There's a difference.
Let's see.
Is it?
It's a property with a home on it.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's
so
what it
per
is.
lot.
Yeah.
So it could be a farm.
It could be.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I wanted to clarify that.
Yeah.
So it could include a farm.
Yeah,
Yes,
but
it's per property.
The square footage is
Per
by
lot.
structure.
Thank you.
Yep. So again, you see the regions 8 and 6, they had the highest median sale value, and they also had the largest square footage of structures. And then region 1 had the lowest median sale value, and it has the smallest square footage of structures. And now looking at the median year built, region 1 has the oldest homes, and the newest homes are located in region 2. With the median year for region 1 being 1958, and the median year for region 2 being 2014. So region 1 had the median lowest sales value, plus it had the smallest average square footage, and it's the oldest homes. And now looking at percent sales by year build of structure. So as you remember, Patrick said that there's 50% of housing units in the county were built before 1980. And here it shows that of the sales in the time period that we're looking at, roughly 37% were built before 1980 of the homes that were sold.
Can I ask another question? Region 7 includes the city of Annapolis, so does all this data also include the city?
Yes, we did not, we didn't break out City of Annapolis. And one of the reasons we didn't do that is because the RK2 didn't break out City of Annapolis. But, you know, City of Annapolis exists, can't ignore it, it has housing in it, it has contributes to the.
So now looking at the ratio of median sales price to household income. This starts in 2000 and goes all the way through until 2019. And you see that the ratio is it takes the median sales price and divides it by the median household income. And in 2000, the ratio was 2.54, and in 2019, the ratio is 3.52. It's pretty consistent from 2010 all the way through 2019. But from 2000 to 2019, the change in the value of median sales price has increased by 4.3%, whereas the change in income has only increased by 2.5%. So homes are getting more expensive and income's not keeping up with the value of the
And we
home.
know how that compares to national data.
We can look at that, but we have information, we can get that.
Interesting to see how that,
We can
with
provide
the
that.
housework.
I think
I would actually like to see it by the county compared to state compared to federal.
Yeah.
We could do
And
that.
actually, also, why is the gap between 2001 and 2009?
There was we don't have the data available for those
Yeah,
years
I don't
because the census ACS wasn't producing it at that time.
But I think you'll also find that the Fed and the state, the trend has been that income growth has not kept up the pace with the housing costs.
Now looking at the ratio of median sales price to median household income, this kind of shows it on the map. It's highest, there's the highest difference in the ratio in the Davidsonville, South County area. The lowest, maybe Brownsville, Crofton area. Looking at Crofton area, not Brownsville. So now looking at county housing need, trying to look at where what's the condition of the households and housing units and how they compare to each other. So, so the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, they provide income limits by the metro statistical area, and these income limits are the guidelines for housing assistance programs. So that's why we broke it out based on their income limits. And in 2018, for Anne Arundel County, the average household size was 2.4 for rental and 2.71 for owner. So we went ahead and used the 3-person household limits from the HUD's income limits. And we created 5 different brackets ranging from extremely low to very high. And extremely low is less than 30% of the area median income. So it takes the area median income, which is 101,000. It's actually 90,900. So that's the area median income, and then 30% of that would fall into the extremely low category, and that's those making $27,270 or less. And then it goes up from there, 30 to 60% AMI, 60 to 120% AMI.
So these are fairly standard, how you bracket it this way, and we were trying to be consistent with the ACDS and some of the studies that they've been doing for affordable housing and low-income housing, just so you know.
Yeah, so this takes the So it breaks the county down, our households down by where do people fall within these income levels. So you can notice that a majority of the county falls within the moderate income bracket between $54,540 to $109,080. And then the second largest group falls within the very high income bracket, over $136,000 for a household. And you can also take note that share with housing cost burden, that's those who are paying over 30% of their income in rent or mortgages, and 85% of those in the extremely low category are paying more than 30%, and 64% in the low. And then it tapers off as the income increases. Now looking at the housing unit stock based off of those same income cost level brackets. So if you were to have, let's see, so the monthly housing cost represents the maximum monthly housing cost for each income bracket using that 30% recommended ratio. Let's see, so in this first bracket here, $682 is the maximum recommended monthly housing cost for a three-person family with a household income of $27,270. And then from there, we calculate the maximum monthly cost for each bracket. And for those, you can see that we only 5% of our housing unit stock falls within the range for the first cost band, the lowest cost band, and 57% of our housing stock falls within the moderate cost band. So now trying to compare the households by desired housing costs with the units in stock that we have. So this chart looks at what households can afford or are likely to pay based on income compared to the actual cost of the housing stock. So for the low and the lowest categories, there are more households with incomes that restrict them to that maximum monthly cost of either $682 or between $683 to $1,364. So their incomes are restricting them to those levels because they're already at that 30% mark. But there's more people who are restricted to that level than we have housing units. So there's roughly 35,000 units that are in demand for units with a monthly cost of less than $1,364 per month.
So does that means that there's 9,630 shortfall?
Yes, there's a gap.
Well, wait, so what this is not comparing existing. This is what's desired. This is a desired, what people would like to be able to pay for their housing at the max, that's based on their income. So what happens is that if you can't afford, you can't find housing in your bracket, like in the lowest, you have to go up.
Right.
Or you're homeless and you live with friends, relatives, you know.
Or you have more people in your house.
Yeah, right.
So, yeah, this is looking at households, so you have to find different ways to afford.
Right, so the number,
These are the household
the actual
incomes.
different number doesn't mean that there's just that many households being provided. This is telling you there's a shortfall of housing.
There's a
People-
demand for
Yes,
another
yes,
9,600
right.
units
Right,
at that point.
right. And then at the upper end, you know, people maybe don't want to spend up to their 30%. They want to spend less than that, and so they'll also fall into the medium, that middle. So they'll be looking at that housing as well.
So this chart here looks at the ability to pay. So if a household currently, if their current monthly payment plus 10% still has them under that 30% recommended threshold, then they're considered that they're able to spend more. So housing expenses account for 20% or less for these people that fall in this category. So if you look at the very high, they have the largest number. Majority of the households highest income bracket, their housing expenses account for less than 20% of their income. So and then looking along the brackets, it goes down and it can go down. And then the quality of structure, again, breaking it out into these categories. The structure codes range from the lowest quality is a 1, and the highest quality would be a 9. And it ranges between 3 and 5. But this actually is just more so how the structure was built. Grade 3 is fair. The dwellings just meet minimum building codes, and and workmanship is acceptable but not excellent. And then grade 5 would be good. Dwellings are generally individually designed, and they have craftsmanship in the household.
So you remember, this is the median, so we've kind of taken everything and kind of found the mid-range of it. I mean, if you're looking at their older housing, that might be a grade, probably housing that's got to be looked at in terms of repairs required.
I'll let Margaret finish up here with the future housing.
Can I ask one question? Sorry, sir. Going back 3 pages,
Okay.
housing, the percentage, households in Anne Arundel County by annual income level, 2018. You said against housing stock. What is our stock?
So the stock is here. This is the housing stock. So basically, there are 12,284 units that fall within that monthly cost range. So the stock, our stock.
Oh, your stock, your base is down there, number of units, 2226.
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Sorry, thank you.
As of 2018, correct.
Is all of 2018.
Yeah. Some census, ACS 1 year. This is an estimate. Okay. Okay, and our last slide here is just to a little comparison in terms of estimating future need in Anne Arundel County. Patrick pointed out that the RKG report said that they projected an initial 28,373 households by 2035. I wanted you to also see that the BMC forecast, which is what my group works on, is really forecasting 18,566 additional households. And that forecast changes yearly, and we update it yearly. The forecast is done for air quality conformance standards. It's not done figuring out how many houses we actually need. But this is what we estimate based on our current zoning and what we consider available land. We do take some environmental constraints into consideration. Okay? And then the ESRI, they do a 5-year projection, so they'll give you the census 2010 number, they'll give you what they think the current 2019 number is, and then do a 5-year projection out. Essentially, it's a 0.6% growth rate. If you use that 0.6% compounded growth rate, they are projecting additional, oh, I know, there it is, 18,264. It's fairly close to what we have in our forecast. And then I also kind of just threw in there what the 2040 numbers are because, you know, your plan's called 2040. Okay, so that ends our presentation on housing. Do you have any questions for us? What we're trying to do is give you enough information so that when we start talking about policies in terms of your housing, you get a feel for what kinds of policies you may need, what kind of housing the county has, and what we might need to supplement what we currently have.
I just had one clarification question. When you were talking about the percentages of like vacants and renter versus owner-owned
Yes.
by region, were the totals, the total county number divided, or was it each region's totals divided? So basically were each region's numbers based on the total county's number of vacancies, owners, and,
The vacancy chart, we didn't.
or was it by the percent, like saying, like there could be a density of more people in one area, and that therefore the percentages are gonna look, you know, different. as opposed to if you did the percentage by the whole county. That's what I'm just trying to clarify.
Yeah, it was done by each specific region. We used Esri. They have a program that kind of separates it all out and customizes it by region. So it was done by each individual region. It wasn't the whole county's number divided subset.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. A lot to digest, a lot to think about, so we appreciate that. And a lot of hard work put into that, so thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, a lot of computer screen time on that, I could tell, so thank you, we appreciate that. So, okay, so going forward, next Wednesday, you're gonna get a packet of information from the staff to review before the meeting on the 4th. We will go over environmental resources and finalize that. We will continue with land use and,
the region policy.
region policy areas as well. So we need to go back to that, get the maps back out, make sure that we're all on the same track for that.
I'm sorry, development policy areas. I keep calling them regions, which confuses.
Policy areas.
Yeah, the policy
Just policy areas is what it's referred to in the Google Drive. So that is your different ones, whether they're corridors, whether they're village, whether they're, help me, there's 7 of them color coded. So you know what I'm talking about. Okay, so we need to finalize those and work on those on the 4th. On the 4th, policy areas. It'll be, she'll finalize it, it's available to you right now on the Google Drive, on the drive, but there'll be directions and updates and a packet with the agenda sent on Wednesday before Thanksgiving. And then they will be off Thursday and Friday. We have the event on Tuesday, and our next meeting is on Wednesday, the 4th. So you have that weekend to do your studying along with everything that you've gotten today. Okay, anything else I need to cover? The minutes, has everybody had a chance to look at the minutes? I'm sure you've all done that, right? So do I have a motion to approve the 2 sets of minutes which were dated October 30th and November 6th? John, so moved, second by Amy. Any corrections, additions, or changes have been given to Mark, because I'm sure you were right on top of reading those and sending those to him. Or Patrick, I think. No, Mark. Mark, okay. So we have all in favor? Aye. Yes. Any abstentions? No? Okay. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Got a question.
Oh, sorry, Kate has a question.
You're going to send us information on the details around the announcement on December 3rd?
Yes, yes. When I get all the
When you know what it is.
specifics, exactly. It'll be December 3rd. I believe it's 11 o'clock, but it's sometime during the day on the 3rd.
Those details are still being developed.
They're still finalizing all that, okay? But I will send that to you after I get it from the staff. The staff will send it to
Somebody
you.
will send it to you.
Yes, you will get it. Okay, any other questions? Great, do I have a motion to adjourn early? So moved, all approved? Thank you all, appreciate it. Have a great holiday, be safe.
It will be or